listen to me. I suppose that's their trait, like maybe.
Yeah, maybe. And Pastor Jerry, have you explained to a lot of them that scientist archetype has a tendency to switch to the leader archetype when circumstances dictate?
I don't know for sure, but that does seem to be the sort of almost like a default. Once you see something, then you tend to rush headlong in. I think a good example of this is not knowing. Very often, if I'm not knowing or I'm not aware of whom I am speaking to, let's say, for example, I'm speaking to a known diaconia, and I forget that I'm speaking to a diaconia who needs a plan, right? That means a technician. In the secular version, we call diaconia a technician, right? So what that means is that you can't run ahead of this person, this technician. They need a runway. They need to know where is the runway, and they need to know where is the starting point, where is the ending point, and so on and so forth. So that's a situation that requires let's say a dictator type person to, even if you know something, it doesn't mean that you can bulldoze your way through. You have to understand the different archetypes, but once the technician knows what the plan is and has been fully briefed ahead of time, usually way ahead of time, that's a different story. And the best is, of course, for them to discover what the plan is through dialogue and conversation, which is why paraclectics like Jacqueline and others, they have such a genius, because they're able to tease out and ask questions instead of directives, downward type of top-down directives. So I think that dictators, or shall we say scientists, who have suddenly it dawned upon them what they're supposed to do, perhaps we could find another way of understanding that it's not about forcing or controlling, but rather about liberating from slavery or enslavement or contemporary forms of slavery. I think, or basically just error, liberation from error. And I think that takes a little bit of maturity and mellowing out by the time you hit your second half. I think you've made enough mistakes, but still the mistakes carry on almost every day for me anyway, where I just assume that everybody would understand, and when you play hardball, when you say that you know, like what Gary says, then people will tend to back off. People will tend to say, okay, this guy seems to know everything, and why should I even, so these are some of very real-time issues where even at conversation at table, light conversation can suddenly turn into very, very dramatic, drama-filled table talk, and perhaps even antagonism and so on and so forth. Very, very quickly, things can escalate because you don't see things my way. Mm. And that is exactly why you should never put a profiteer as a diplomat. Diplomats best are handled, give that role to the technician, the diaconia, because they know how to skillfully, tactfully handle almost any situation when they are trained and when they understand what's the stakes. And people go to war because of profiteers. Same thing in hotel industry. You will never hire a profit. That's why most profiteers are in prison already. They're just in prison. That's it. I mean, we're all either we're in prison or we just haven't been caught yet. Yeah, that's it. Cult leaders. Yeah, call us what you like. But that's the problem. You never hire a profiteer for, let's say, front desk management at a hotel. They would destroy the reputation of, you never would put them in a cockpit of a commercial jet airliner. Everybody will be vomiting at the back there. So leadership, it's a terrible curse on scientists because they see things and, so you got to do it like Copernicus. He said, I know it, but don't publish it until the day after I die. I think that's the good advice.
Okay, so I have some to add. So like for the rest of you, if you don't mind, like after Pastor Jerry has shared so much of his insights, would you share like maybe some of your thoughts? Like, let's say, why do you respect or don't respect the scientists, or why do you think people follow them? Like, okay, I deal with young people. A lot of my young people actually say they like the Joker because he's amoral. He gets things done in his own way, according to his own whims. So basically, it's I do not care a single hoot about what society thinks about me. So like some young people, because young people, especially the teenagers, they are more rebellious. So maybe that's why some of them follow the scientist archetype, because they need a cause to rebel together. Yeah.
May I say?
Yeah.
Why do people follow them? I suppose those who don't know the way, or when they're lost, and this person, this leader come forward and say, I know the way. Naturally, you follow them. Like Churchill, for example, during the war, he was the one who was able to lead the nation when they are all in chaos. And so
Yes.
that's why the people follow him.
Very good point. Very good point, Pastor Jerry. And can I also mention that our suspicion is Hitler is also another scientist.
Yeah, that's right. I believe so.
So it's like the two scientist archetypes are like having an epic war on international stage.
Yes.
And you can see how one decided to be twisted, not decided, but you can say he didn't deal with his trauma.
Yeah.
And then the other one decided to step up and be a dictator or a leader to England because no one had the courage to be nasty in that sense. Yeah. So Nizelle says that, they always seem to have fresh ideas, knowledgeable, always seem to know ahead. Yeah. So, okay, let's move on from the scientist to the internet connection, the technician, which Pastor Jerry has shared a bit just now, but maybe Eleanor can help me a little bit with this because I am very far from the technician archetype. So yes, for this archetype, Steve Jobs, Meryl Streep, Marcus Aurelius, Muhammad Ali, they are outstanding people in their respective fields. But okay, even with Steve Jobs, from what I understand, if you actually talk to the people who've worked with him before, he's quite visionary, but he's not a profiteer or scientist kind of visionary. He is all about the fine details. A product cannot be 2 millimeters off. He is the kind of boss who says, I need it now and it was due yesterday. That kind of thing. But he drives himself that way also. But I would say, Eleanor, would you want to help facilitate this one?
All right. I think we just need to zoom into the corporate culture where someone is very, very excellent in what he or she does, gets promoted to be in a leadership position. But once he or she is in a leadership position, everyone doesn't like the same person anymore. Everyone thinks that this new leader doesn't know the hearts and the minds of the team members that he or she is leading. They think that he is so absorbed in his little world that he is disconnected from the rest of the team. Have you met such a person before? Like on the surface, this person is so good. He is so skillful, so proficient, but put him in a leadership position, all hell breaks loose. He doesn't know how to manage people. He doesn't know how to communicate effectively. Everyone gets offended by such a person. So when you come across such a person, the chances is that this person is from a very task-oriented archetype. Yes, someone said like out of touch from reality. Yes. So this person is very absorbed by his work. He takes pride in his work, but he doesn't know, or he can't be bothered with the rest of the human beings on the same team. Yes, detail oriented. Yes. So when you think about such a person, let us extrapolate what would be some of the positive aspects of this person and what would be some of the negative aspects of this same person if he were to be in a leadership position. And from there, you can start to think, why is it that you can respect this person but not respect the same person in other areas of leadership?
I think, Eleanor, one thing came to my mind, which is good advice. Very often it's not heeded, but it is good advice. That not to appoint someone who is so young and fresh and green into a leadership position. Let them wait a while and let that process of maturity. So I think it's not just the technician or the scientist, but I think all that's good advice for all the archetypes. For experience, there needs to be a little bit of experience, and I think that's a wisdom there. But in the heat of the moment and in the competition that we especially see technicians in, that drive for number one and to compete and to win, actually, sometimes it can get in the way of learning true lessons, especially life lessons anyway.
Pastor Gerard, that is super on point. And Pastor Gary also said impatient, especially with those who fall short of his expectation of perfection. Oh, that is so true. At least in our own experience with the technician archetypes. Yeah. Achiever, yeah, Araceli said achiever. Yes, that's true. When they win big.
Yeah, I would have to agree with what Rona says. It's like, they reach the top of the ladder wherever they really desire. Like Meryl Streep is a like she won so many, do you call that awards or prizes? I'm not sure. Yeah, so if they do win, they win big. But maybe I would, like for me, I would say that why do people follow them? Maybe because they know that they can get to the top. So I would see some ambitious people being very willing to follow a person like Steve Jobs. Yes, well organized. But can I suggest, from a lot of technicians I see, they're only well organized in things that they care about. Anything else that they don't really care about, it's a bit okay. Seah, people need to mimic. Oh yeah, people need to know their train of thoughts. They actually have a plan. Like if you look at Steve Jobs, he has a plan for the products, but he is more famous for throwing a temper tantrum for people not knowing his unspoken plans. Okay, let's move on. Do you have, is any one of the technician archetype here? Would you like to share a little bit about yourself? Like, why do you respect like some of these people, or maybe what's important to you as if you were leading? If not, then maybe we jump ahead to the next one. Okay, sorry. You jumped too much. The educator. So for this one, the educator, what would you describe their leadership style? Maybe you can even reference Moses if you're not familiar with Darwin or Hippocrates. But maybe let me share a bit about both Darwin and Hippocrates, is that both of them are very good with organizing stuff, categorizing. They spend a lot of time studying. They know a lot of, they know things that are so in-depth that I think probably most people don't know what they're talking about. But if you ask them, they can actually make it simple for you. So what would you say is, like, what would you use some words to describe their leadership style? I'm sure some of you have met them in schools, in universities, you usually tend to see a lot more of them in schools, libraries, and all this. That's not their only place, but even like people who do online, like, directories of information sources. Yeah, you can just type in the chat, like, what do you think? Why do you respect them? Or maybe why they're not your cup of tea. So, okay, for a task-based archetype, yeah, Pauline says people follow them for what they know. Pretty true, especially if you're thirsting for knowledge. Arrogance can be, but from what I see, it can sometimes be intellectual arrogance, like, you don't know this. They may not even say, they just give you a look like, like you don't know, that kind of look. So yes, Pastor Gary says it can be true because we see a lot of such people outside the church context too. Araceli says they think deep. True. Most of them are lost in their thoughts. Yes, they have the ability to explain complex ideas. Like, I'm sure some of you have met teachers that no matter how much they explain, you still don't understand. They're obviously not the teacher archetype. And there are some who, once they explain, you're like, oh, wow, why has no one told me that? So Pastor Jared, maybe you can share a bit more of what you understand of the archetype, because we've not seen that many in our experience, at least for Eleanor and I.
Well, I struggle with that myself in school. Why do I hate certain people? I remember writing a letter in primary 3 to my principal to sack one teacher. And then I got called into the principal's office, and my dad was there and all the other students who signed the letter. We hated with a passion certain teachers in America, and we could express that. Other teachers we loved, we could have died for them. And why? I asked myself this question, why? What is it? And I have no answer except that there must be something about their innate ability to convey and impart. And when you look in the case of, you mentioned just now, Moses, you find him at Kadesh Barnea, instead of saying, as a pro-Islamic leader would have, guys, come on, boys, follow me, let's go and take the land. Instead, he takes a vote. And then, he comes out at the end of 40 years, having written the Pentateuch and 613 laws and so on. So that kind of tells me that he was not really the leader kind of person that typically we think of, but more of a leadership genius through education and impartation. That's about all that, I notice about this archetype.
Okay.
I also noticed.
Yeah, share a bit.
Because I am a very intellectually inclined person, so I admire and deeply respect people who can articulate their ideas very well in books. So for example, a very well evolved educator archetype can distill very profound ideas in mind-blowing ways, in ways that an average person can never think of. So he can use analogy that you could never think of unless you were gifted with the same gifts as an educator archetype. So I find that if you are well read, you really love to read books, especially books on science, philosophy, you will tend to find a lot of the educator archetypes authoring these books. And usually the way they craft out the books is very astounding, because they really put in the thought to draw up the framework, categorize things, and explain in ways to make sure that everyone gets the message across, no matter how stupid you are. So that's the brilliance of the educator archetype. No matter how stupid you are, you will get it.
Yeah, I appreciate such people too. And because I've asked Eleanor to explain, because recently we found that an author, she's obsessed about, is this educator archetype? And every time she shares me one thing, firstly, my mind gets blown. Next, I need a few days to process it. Then thirdly, looking at the volume that that person has generated, the scientist archetype has died inside a few times.
So basically, I'm delving into traditional Chinese medicine. So this guy is a Taiwanese teacher. He majored in engineering, and then after a few years in engineering, he left engineering. He went to start his own adventure in Qigong, the Chinese martial arts, and then from that point onwards, he accumulated at least 30 years of experience. So by the time he was writing the books, he's already well in his 60s, and he already produced at least 10 books. And every time I read each one of his book, within the first 5 minutes, my brain is like, oh wow, that's amazing stuff that I never knew. And he explained it in ways that are much more interesting, clearer than any other person who is an expert in the field can explain. And he's not even an expert in, say, for example, traditional Chinese medicine. He's just someone who is very interested in Qigong. And because he could see how the Chinese saw the philosophy of Qigong and how it's tied to the entire philosophy that builds up the Chinese culture, he dissected it so neatly. And every chapter takes at least, like, I need to really read, dissect it, and then understand what he's trying to say. And by the time I understood, it was in a way that I could really remember for life. And then when I shared my ideas with Cheyenne, both our minds get blown again, because when you teach, you learn new thing, you learn the same thing in a new way. So that's how we found out that the educator archetype is so brilliant in that sense.
Yep. Okay, thanks for sharing. Let's move on to the next one. Our dear resource manager, which I would say, at least also from my understanding, that most females are able to access it, especially it's a gift that's given after marriage in that sense. So I would like everyone to share a bit more about, what are some words to describe this resource manager archetype? Like in your mind, I'm sure you have met a lot of them. But in addition, Queen Elizabeth, almost every one of us know. Jeff Bezos, maybe not. Warren Buffett, depends. But yeah, from what you understand, like what are the things that you respect about them? What are some words you can use to describe their leadership? Why would you want to follow someone like them? Like, okay, I have to admit, for my archetype, maybe I won't really follow, but I would love for them to take care of my schedule and logistics and money, definitely, because I cannot trust myself in any of this area. Yes, it is the motherly heart also of, like what Paula has shared. She loved, like, because she was so well loved, because she was quite motherly in that sense. And yes, Pastor Gary, prudent in monetary matters. One of the experience I have with someone I used to work with, resource manager, just a silly example, someone printed 500 pages one-sided. Let's just say that that person got yelled at by a resource manager for wasting paper. Yeah, so even when we comforted the resource manager that we can use the other side as rough paper, it took the resource manager some time to cool down. So yeah, yes, maximizers, optimizers. RSLE says they're meticulous with people and things for the best use. So why would you respect them or not respect them? So there are some people who maybe they are a bit more people-based archetype. Maybe they won't really like them because they say, hey, I am a person. I am not a thing for you to move around. Because sometimes, especially if they are not very matured, they may treat you as a chess piece to move around. As long as they maximize their Excel sheet or like their Google Sheets. Yeah, they are very orderly. The Queen has a charisma, but she is very different from Margaret Thatcher. Thatcher is a bit out there, in your face. The Queen is more smile, wave, oh, the kids are here, that kind of thing. So yes, cost conscious, Jacqueline, they know how to delegate tasks. Very good. So wow, it seems that everyone is a lot more familiar. They are like two brains, not one. Pastor Jerry, you got to explain that. I don't understand.
Well, God told me to marry this one, and so there was no, at that time I didn't have modalities to explain why, but Father knew best for me, and so that I can use my brain for other creative purposes. And so I, it's like most people have one brain, but not the metadidomy. They are able to have multiple sort of CPUs running all at the same time for especially things like numbers and calculating, tracking. And of course, it's just a matter of time before, if they're in the marketplace, they get spotted and promoted and transferred, and or even not transferred, but I mean, they build the whole system around them. And they are the people who basically are the backbone. I would call it the neck that turns the head in organizations. They're the silent, the very quiet behind the scenes organizers who hardly say a word. But if ever they do say a word, you better listen to them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And it seems that a lot of people are a lot more familiar with the resource manager. This is great. Let's move on to the next one. The coach. Okay, so all these people, they are a lot warmer. At least I personally prefer their profile photo smiles. They look more genuine. Because later when you see the leaders, you look at their smile, a little different. So the coach, why? Like Nick Vujicic, Oprah Winfrey, Richard Branson, how would you describe their leadership styles? Because they lead, but maybe I would suggest they don't go like follow me. They influence. It's a bit like courtship. Like, hey, do you want to? That kind of feeling. So what are some of the other words? It's like maybe for a coach, maybe their style is more invitation. Like, hey, I'm going on an adventure. Do you want to join me? That kind of style. Yes, very inspirational, very motivational. They lead by example, but I have seen a couple of coaches, maybe not so matured. They lead by talking, but they don't lead by example. They don't necessarily live out what they talk. But very inspirational and motivational. Thanks, Rowena. And I think a lot of their styles like that, even Branson, who is a business person, he's charismatic too. I would say a lot of them, their charisma is more of the warm kind. You want to be cozy with them. You want to be their friend. Persuasive, yes, they're persuasive because it's like they're asking you, they're inviting you to join them, or maybe to use secular terms, they're seducing you to join them. And they are good at that, provided they don't keep talking and forget about the main agenda lah. Anyone has any other things to share? Pastor Jerry, like, have you, I think there are quite a few, even like from your interaction.
I noticed the secular trend, even for tech companies, the big tech companies, they appoint certain rather flamboyant or charismatic types, and they give them titles like evangelist, and they're like an evangelist for Dreamweaver, or they're an evangelist for some sort of, they actually borrow the term evangelist. So they could be the, speaking to millions, or they could be speaking to small groups, and they win you over. They can sell the proverbial refrigerator to the Eskimo. And why do you need a refrigerator in Alaska, right? Everything's so cold. Oh no, you need one, because he's the coach. He's going to help you to be the facilitative catalyst for high performance and winning that way. But he does it in a very integrative, inclusive way. And so that winsomeness, that smile, I think it's probably the best hat to wear in the office, where it doesn't matter where we go, as long as we all go together. The more we are together, the happier we'll be, right? So that's the kind of very inclusive kind of dialogue-based influencer, as you say.
Yeah. A few of the chat keywords are also gold, like Marcel says that we see the potential in people. Araceli says that they are not imposing, democratic, encourage participation, which is great as a leader. Pastor Gary says they empower people. Suzette says they're a counselor. Bishop Benny says they're influential, living a strong example. And Bobby says that maybe not so much teach, but maybe influence instead of giving order. The giving order we'll see later for the leader. But I would like to agree with what Pastor Jerry has shared, that I have seen a lot of corporate CEOs, especially the ones who are good with business development and sales. They usually wear the coach hat and they charm the socks off from left to right. And clients ask them for contracts instead of, being like people chase for contracts. So great to see. Yeah, Rowena says that they bring out the best in you, which is true, because they don't say my way or the highway. They say come along. Then we go to the next archetype, which is, you look at the smiles of these people. Do they look a bit more business-like smile? The leader, how can we forget? Most of the people who sort of have their mark in our history books are the leader archetype. Maybe their feet is not the leader archetype, but at least we see it very strongly. Like Margaret Thatcher, you compare her to the Queen Elizabeth. Ooh, would you say the vibes are very different? Even the smile is very different. Like Nelson Mandela, he's a politician, but his determination, his willpower, I would say, top notch. To be able to be in prison for so long in your fight for freedom. Napoleon Bonaparte, let's just say that he was a low-born noble who became an emperor, even though it was after the French had decided that they didn't want royalty, but he still crowned himself emperor. And he's like, come, let's go and conquer. Okay, Genghis Khan, he conquered even up to the borders of Europe during his era for a bunch of nomads with not much land of their own, together warring tribes. the tribes basically hated each other, killed and plundered each other, and he could bring this entire bunch of bloodthirsty nomads and harness them to conquer all the way to the borders of Europe. So what are some of the things that you would say, you would describe their leadership style? Why do you respect or not respect them? Why do people follow them? So I would say, for me, I would follow a person like that because maybe their purpose is very strong and what they want to achieve is in line with what I want to achieve also. And I don't have the energy to drag everyone along. And another thing I have noticed, this archetype, the leader archetype, they are a people-based archetype, but they actually use people for their mission. They understand how people work, but it does not necessarily mean they want to care for the person unless it fulfills their purpose. So maybe I use Napoleon as an example. If you read history, you know that Napoleon was so-called madly in love with Josephine, so-called, but he married her and he eventually annulled the marriage or divorce. I can't remember the term. 5 years after he married her, because she did not fulfill what he wanted, which is to produce an heir. So this is a bit of the ruthlessness of a leader in a sense. But, after they annulled their marriage, he says he still loves Josephine, which when I read it, I was like, okay. But this shows that the will and the mission of a leader is very important to them. Yeah, the fact that he would divorce or annul his marriage with the woman he loves so crazily, this shows you that actually maybe he loves the mission, which is to produce an heir, more than he loves Josephine. Thelma says it's like leader gives direction where to go. Yes, usually, and they can drive things there. Araceli says, they troubleshoot, self-actualize. Very true, by hook or by crook. I know a lot of them actually don't care how you get there, even if it is very gray, I would say.
I think, Cheyenne, they don't troubleshoot so much as they just shoot the troubler. They just shoot the trouble fellow. Get rid of them.
That is true, because if I was to look at Thatcher, Napoleon, and Genghis Khan, they just got rid of that guy, or whoever got in their path, basically. They bulldoze. Yes, Jacqueline, bulldoze, correct. At least this is what we observe. I would say a lot of them do set clear goals. Expectation maybe not, especially if they are not so mature, because they may expect you to know, which is one thing I've noticed with a lot of not so mature versions of all archetypes. They don't tell you what they want. Male or female, this is not a gender thing. I have met males who don't tell you what they want also. Yeah, I would say Mandela's characteristics, I would say his immense willpower to follow through, Joshua, because I know of a lot of people would have just thrown in the towel also, because maybe they have something else to chase after. Rowena says that they will bend or break things if they have to for their goals. I've noticed this quite a lot, and especially with all these famous people. Pastor Gary says they are very focused and strong-headed. Yep, those are nice terms. I will borrow them, because the other term is stubborn and refusing to change. sometimes, but they can be surprisingly flexible if you are able to pitch that, if you do ABC instead of CDE, you might get to your place, the place you want faster. Then they would be open to convincing. Yeah, they are very results orientated also. Yes, they are good at assembling people together with various strengths, and they have strong determination. Yes. So, Pastor Jerry, anything to add about the leader archetype?
I think the hard-headedness of the leader from young, from birth, you can see they're always getting themselves, injured somehow. From young, you can see these are called the wounds of a leader from young, and sometimes they can, even in an unredeemed state, find themselves inadvertently bullying other people and just, not realizing the blind spots. But basically, they are very, very determined. Would probably be the best word to describe this. Incredible determination to get the job done. And oftentimes they create nations, they create, they rally together, they are the force to be reckoned with. Yeah, great leaders.
Yeah, I think Joshua put in quite a few good points. They risk being an egoist in echo chamber because sometimes, especially if they're not very mature, they don't want to hear people say that what they want is impossible. So it is actually easier to surround yourself with people who say, oh, yes, 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 whatever you say and do. And I agree with him. Both Thatcher and Napoleon kind of ended pretty badly. And this shows that, maturity is needed for all archetypes. There are people who don't fully read history. They only read like, oh, wow, Thatcher's so, Thatcher, Napoleon, so glamorous. A part of me dies inside when people say that. So I think people should finish reading the history of all these people. We
don't need to look so far. Let's look at our own government, Singapore government. It was built by Lee Kuan Yew, and look at how subsequent generations of the government are influenced by his leadership. They are not necessarily stepping out. They might be trying to follow a blueprint. So this is my take on it. Yeah, we'll shut up.
Yes. Because the YouTube link might still be available for public. So President Seah, this one is a bit sensitive, but I have my suspicion President Seah is not this archetype, but it's his shoe that he wears. Because, there is a discussion we can have offline, not the most suitable for this day and age. Lastly, the emergency responder. At least I understand a lot of people are this archetype, or at least identify with this archetype. So let's have a good discussion on this. What are some of the words you would describe their leadership style, ranging from Princess Diana, Batman, King David, Hercules? Depends on which one you're more familiar. I'm assuming King David will be the most familiar for most of you here. Compassion, yes. Yep. Strong-headed, I would say maybe not so much strong-headed, but they will do whatever it takes to perform the rescue. But I would have to say, I noticed that a lot of emergency responders don't necessarily rescue people. They prefer rescuing situations which indirectly help people. They prefer solving problems instead. Yes, Poland, they save. Their leadership style is saving. So why do you respect them or don't respect them? They're loving and caring, yes, for most parts. But look at Batman, look at Hercules. They are rescuers or emergency responses that have gone a bit rogue, in a sense. So loving and caring, maybe if they were a bit more mature, or maybe if they have dealt with their trauma. They can stand alone when no one else will. Wow, I love this point, because like Batman, King David, Hercules, they can stand alone. Like, I honestly don't care. Even if you're not with me, I will do whatever it takes. So the question I want to ask all of you is, I will do whatever it takes. How is it different? An emergency responder versus a leader. What is the main difference between the I will do whatever it takes? people will follow them because they are touched by their care. Yes, some of them, yes, I've been taken care of by a few emergency responders. So let's just say that they are very good in the emergency stage, but they are not into the, like, 5 years down the road, if you're still crying, they might be a bit tempted to dump you instead.
The emergency responder, the response can be short term. That of a leader can be long term.
Yes, okay, that's a good point. Paramedic rushing where angels fear to tread, mentoring standards. It's an interventionist. Yes, Joshua, generally reactionary. Not a fan of planning, I can see. Yeah, for all these guys, and even Princess Diana, they are not major planners. At least they will not plan to the length of a technician, not their style. And tendency not to see a big picture sometimes, I think, yes. And I think this is also their heart of compassion. They see something that needs rescue now. Who cares about your big picture when someone is dying, in that sense? Yeah, Queen of Hearts. So, well, so, some say that they are busybody, nosy. I think so. Because you see someone really needing rescue, but the person doesn't want you to rescue. Oh yes, I forgot. Eleanor, please share your thoughts, because this is something you had to go through. I will hand over this to you because this is your feat.
What would you like me to share, Cheyenne? What aspect about the emergency responder?
Okay, so what are some of the things that, because we have quite a few who identify with this, so maybe share what you had to mature in, like maybe where you started from, your bleeding heart, to now where you're a bit, let's just say, I don't think your heart's bleeding anymore, but yeah.
Well, I will agree with Joshua. I said that an immature or unevolved emergency responder will tend to be very reactionary. They are short-term thinkers. If they don't address their emotional trauma, it becomes a strong need to want to save other people, to soothe their broken egos. So this is how I will put it in a very untactful manner. You need to soothe yourself by saving other people. If not, you would feel very unimportant in this physical world. So for a truly evolved emergency responder who has outgrown their own trauma, they are able to think rationally and balance their emotions whenever they make a decision. So say, for example, as I've mentioned very, very early on in the first session, some people are really not worth your time. And then you will be able to make a very clear judgment whether or not it is worth your time, your energy, your effort to even want to volunteer a little bit of a service to that person. So that is very true in all service lines, especially in the coaching line, where some clients obviously are not a great fit for you, and you can make a very clear decision that this person is really, really not worth your time, and you won't feel guilty about not even attempting to help the person. So that itself is one part of leadership, because leadership fundamentally is not about saving people. It's actually about empowering people so that they also can see themselves that they can have the potential to rise up above their current state. So to me, that was that is the growth that I needed to experience from a less mature archetype to a more mature archetype.
Yeah. So and I think because this archetype is also my main show, so sometimes I have to resist the urge to, just because the person is crying, poor thing, and saying how poor thing they are, do understand that there are some people who use this as a form of manipulation to get what they want from you. not because they really need saving. So this is something that you need to calm your heart and ask for God's wisdom before you rescue, because every one person you rescue is equivalent to at least 3 to 4 other situations of people you cannot rescue, because you really physically, I cannot chop you into 4 parts to do 4 things. You need to make a choice. Is your choice of this one worth the 4 or 5 that you are giving up? So yeah, Nizelle also says, yeah, they maybe the less mature ones, maybe the younger ones, sometimes forget that, because of their emotions, they say something, but it destroys the whole thing instead. Yeah, or like, silly example, you have 1 rotten apple, you can't bear to throw it away. Then after 2 days later, your whole basket is full of rotten apples. So Joshua, you say that it's back to the search of significance for those who are still in trauma. Could you explain a bit more?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so actually there's a book on this one. It's a Christian book, but it's a book called The Search for Significance, which helps to explain why there are a lot of people, like what Eleanor was actually saying, where everything they're doing is actually in an attempt to gain acceptance or to gain a purpose in their life. So what happens is that we do know a lot of people. Codependence is a lot of emergency responders actually respond out of codependence. So if they're doing it out of codependence, actually there'll be other question is, are they really an emergency responder, or are they still just searching for their niche? And then their emergency responder is actually their fallback due to the fact that they don't know who they are yet. And they are attempting to use the emergency responder to gain acceptance and gain responses or gain appreciation in order to find out where to get. They want the pat on the back, they want the pat on the head, they want the hug, they want the cheering, they want the award. But that's due to the trauma. If the question now is, if they didn't have that trauma, would they really be a first responder? You see,
I think Eleanor can, Eleanor,
you get my point, yeah.
Yes, I get your point, but I think Eleanor will be more suitable to answer this.
I totally affirm what Joshua said. In fact, actually, even though I work mainly in the physical fitness field, I do see this a lot play out, even among my clients. It shows up in how they deal with their health issues, for example. And it's true, because if you don't process your trauma, you will take on a shoe that is not you, and you get stuck in this vicious cycle, trying to gain public affirmation or affirmation from people you desperately want to get acceptance and affirmation from, but they are not willing to see you for who you are. And so this is so real. And then again, how many of them are truly aware? And if they're aware, are they in the space to want to tackle their unprocessed trauma head on? So for me, as a emergency responder, I didn't identify with it for a very long time. I actually identified more with the technician archetype, simply because of Asian upbringing, and I felt like it was yes, it is good to be perfect. It is good to be excellent. It is the thing to be the good girl. No mistakes made at all, and be outstanding as possible. So I took pride in that archetype, that technician archetype, for a very long time, until I realized somewhere in my early adult life, in my 20s, that why is it that I feel so miserable trying to conform to perfection? And yet, at the same time, if I don't conform, it doesn't feel like me. And I had to go through my own throes, my own crucible, before I could say, hey, actually, that's not the real me. I'm actually more of a emergency responder. I couldn't care less if the approach that I take is less than perfect. Like, say, for example, in the field of coaching, who cares? I mean, I don't care if I use unconventional exercise methodologies on my clients. Like, I don't mind being called out for, why do you not do this, or why do you not do that? I don't mind, because as long as the strategy works for the client. And so it has come to a point where I could clearly see how the technician shoe was something that I forced myself to wear, because it was a survival technique as I was growing up. And it was only when I did my own emotional trauma processing that I could actually unearth who I was inside, that I was an emergency responder. I really delight in solving problems, not necessarily saving people. And I'm okay with being unorthodox. I'm okay with being less than perfect, as long as I get the job done. And so from that point onwards, when I recognized that there was a clear distinction between the trauma-induced archetype versus who I was inside, that was how I became free as a person. So I realized that I could consciously choose what is the response that I want to take in every situation. And I'm even more aware, okay, when I respond, when I feel that way, for example, say I feel slighted when someone says, hey, Eleanor, you should be doing this. Hey, Eleanor, you're not doing the way it's supposed to be. I might feel slighted sometimes, because after all, I had that trauma when I was growing up. But I am in a better place to recognize that feeling of being offended was also a residue from having worn the shoe of the technician archetype. But then when I go back to my true archetype as an emergency responder, I ask myself from that space, does this really matter to me? Was I doing my best? Did I give my best to my client? Did my client achieve the objective that we set together? If all these criteria are met, then I'm okay. I did my part. There's no point in me feeling offended by what another person said. So that's my experience, to shed some light on the search for significance, because fundamentally, the sense of significance is part of our spiritual health. And it's related very closely to our purpose in life. And until a person is able to confront his inner demons and come to realize that, you are flawed, but you're also special, and you have still a set of gifts and talents that you can use to make an impact on the world, until the person is able to come to that point, he or she will definitely be stuck in confusion, trying to make sense of which archetype they are, and reacting versus responding. Yeah.
It's interesting, like a couple of probably emergency responder archetypes say that they are pet lovers. I know Eleanor likes animals too, so I'm not sure if this is an interesting side pattern. Yeah. I definitely wear the shoe if pet lover is one of them, but I like animals, but I don't love them. I'll leave it at that. So, okay, now that we have gone through all of this, I would like everyone to type in the chat what is the one thing you have learned today. And even as we are typing, after that, Pastor Gerard, could you help us sum up this session as people are typing in things, and then we can have questions and answers, and after that, and wrap up.
Sure. Great. Okay, let's type in whatever it is that you're taking away, your dabao. What you take dabao?
Oh, I love it. Rescue by invitation only. I think a lot of emergency responders need that lesson carved into their hearts. Like even for me, because it's my main shield, I am also still affected.
No, I think any of the faith-based students of modalities, especially Christians, and especially if you're Holy Ghost, filled with the Holy Ghost, you wear the hat. You have to. There's no getting around stopping like the Good Samaritan and helping those bleeding by the side of the road. That is your duty, right? But it may not be your joy.
Yeah.
Whereas for emergency responders, it's really joy. It's your life. Yeah, it's your blood. Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed I learned this term from a friend where they say that I would say maybe an unmature emergency responder might be drawn to what we call the broken kittens.
Yeah. Which as a Christian you must help. You must stop and help. That is what we're taught in Catholic school from young, the nuns and all that. If you look at all the nuns and that's what they are basically. But let me also just interject about this phrase that I learned today. The one thing that I learned was, Eleanor, your phrase of trauma-induced. You said trauma-induced archetype.
It's very true. It's very common because we were just discussing the other day. Most of us with Asian parents and Asian upbringing have the technician as our trauma archetype because we were never good enough.
Yeah.
And I think in some respects, we try to mirror our parents. So my dad is a technician archetype. So I mirrored him. I imitated him to the best that I could until I realized that it didn't make sense to me. Yeah, now that I'm an adult, fully, I have my own life, my own way of thinking. It no longer makes sense to me. Then I had to search who.
Yeah, we're more than our parents, although sometimes we do look like them. With the English expression is a chip off the old block. And, I appreciated the love and the attention I got from my dad whenever he would give me positive strokes and so on and so forth. But he was 100% him. Yeah. And I have to be 100% me, and I'm not him.
Love some of the learning that you are putting in the chat also. Yeah. Yeah. Pastor Gerard, you want to sum up?
Yeah. Let's see. How are we doing for time? Okay, good. Yeah, we should be done. Yeah, I think perhaps the most interesting of all is this MVP, rescuer, emergency responder, because it's so common, especially in the church. You can't, I mean, the whole purpose of the church, actually, if you think about it, is to respond to emergencies. And I was saying responding to rescues, by invitation only it's a joke, right? Because how can you schedule an emergency, right? I mean, emergencies happen, and so as much as we like to think that we could rationally respond, let's schedule. I think we'll have an emergency next Tuesday afternoon or something like that. It doesn't work. Life is not like that, right? And especially as a parent, that, raising up children, it's going to be 24/7 sort of a situation. And of course, but at the same time, the need is not the call. And truly, the emergency is not the call. And this is where the rubber hits the road between husband and wives as well. And so we have to be aware of our hats. We have to be aware of our sovereign foundations, our father, our mother. Who are we pleasing? Who did we want to please? And so on and so forth. Who will we traumatize by? Teachers, close, who will we betrayed by? Close friends, so on and so forth. So all these hurts and traumas, they accumulate and they confuse, they tend to cloud the mind and so on and so forth. The more freedom we have, and I guess we come back to this, God wants us to be 100% ourselves, like nobody else, no a copycat of anybody. And that's difficult when you have a culture with perhaps an Asian culture, a Christian culture, a close church culture. You tend to resonate with everybody else, and then it becomes like those that experiment where you take 50 of those metronomes and you set them all going, and at first they're all at different rates and ticks and talks and so on and so forth, but given 15 minutes the whole lot is ticking and talking together, and that's the nature of culture. That's the power of culture. That's the power of accent. That's why if you live long enough in Singapore, you'll be using the la and the le, you'll be using all the Singlish and so on. Or if you're living in Philippines, you'll be using the po and the deba and the o and all these kind of things, right? You can't help it. It's part of the culture, but you are more than your culture. And by stripping off those externalities and being wise enough to recognize that that's not really me. I'm just trying to copy my dad. I'm trying to be like my dad. I'm trying to please my mom. I'm trying to, be like my pastor, my leader, my bishop. No, I need to be myself, because I'll be happiest that way. And a happy disciple will be growing all the time. And that's why God, have you ever thought, why did God redeem you in the first place? He likes you. He likes the way you are. So just don't change, right? Sing that Billy Joel song, what was the song? I remember he sang something like, don't go changing something. Does anybody know that song? Don't go changing something. Anyway, I can't sing it, but I remember there was this famous song by this singer, right? And it was a love song. And he was trying to tell his partner, look, don't change. Don't change for me. Be yourself. I think God wants us to be who we are. And that's why he saved us, right? And, the moment we come into the faith, we try to be like this and that and copy and all that. That's not the way. And to be free. I think that is, at the end of the day, the goal of modalities. Freedom in self-mastery, where you can be proud of the fact that you're made in a specific image that you were destined to be. This is my DNA. Recently, there was a famous movie that came out also, and the theme song, one of the many theme songs, was "This Is Me." And it was about all these freaks in a circus. I don't know if you remember it, but it was called The Greatest Show on Earth. And it's a bunch of, freaks, some were tall, some were short, midgets, some were women, had lots of facial hair and so on and so forth. And it got crowds around the world crying at the cinemas because everyone is different. Nobody's perfect, and just accept it and get on with life and go on and forget about yourself. I think there's a great song we used to sing in the 80s, just forget about yourself and concentrate on him and worship him. How can we live selfless lives, totally focused on what we are supposed to do, and no one else can do what we are supposed to do, be it the liberator, leader, be it the rescuer, be it the economist or the encourager, the coach or the mentor or whatever the specialist. It doesn't matter. Who are we? What are we? What have we been wired for? Do that and only that, and focus on that, and be thankful and grateful that you are, living this life, literally, as what Nick Vujicic says, life without limits. Absolutely without limits. And I think more and more the world is going that way in terms of nomads, global nomads. People are suddenly waking up from the 9-to-5 job and saying, what in the world am I doing? I'm a slave to this, and so on and so forth. And they want to get on with their life. I think Cheyenne and Eleanor, you're actually very brave to be beating a path in this area that is so unconventional and non-stereotypical. And I can only say, to God be the glory. And this is an adventure. Life is suddenly an adventure. I think Augustine once said, he said, to seek the Almighty is the greatest adventure, and what did he say? I can't remember now what he said. To seek the Almighty is the greatest adventure. To fall in love with the Almighty is the greatest romance, and to find Him is the greatest human achievement. I don't know, but it just seems that romance and adventure and achievement, that's at the core of the me generation. Let's not complain about millennials. Let's reach out to them. They want to know who I am. It's the me generation. Okay, let's go after. I appreciate a secular version of modalities because you can speak the language, the lingo, the music of this next generation. I say, let's go for it. Let's do whatever it takes to reach that cause. Thank you so much. God bless.
I just want to share a very quick nugget of my own learning from modality. Because I'm only 34 years old this year, I'm actually the midway between the Generation Z, who are the me generation, and the older generation, the Generation X. I can see how, across the three generations, Generation X, the Y, and the Z, are struggling with such massive changes on a global scale. Currently, right now, at least in the last 5 years, I can't help but notice that there is actually a very strong undercurrent of resentment and uncertainty, as well as confusion. So we see a lot of people who are lost in their self-identity, the self-worth, the sense of direction in life. And so the least that modalities can do is actually to offer the light in the darkness as to understanding who they are really inside, and that there is no judgment because you're just built differently. So for example, when you look at LGBT, gender, non-binary gender issues, for example, it is a very clear-cut expression, a desperate cry for people to see them for who they are that transcends even gender boundaries. But of course, in the Christian circle, we do know that God deliberately created us men and women, and that there is also a purpose why we are created as a man and a woman biologically. But how can you convey that love, the affirmation, the acceptance to someone who is lost in such a fundamental component of their identity? And modalities comes in useful because modalities at least helps to reconcile what kind of role, or in Joshua's words, the significance, the significance they play in the physical world that they live in, because most of us we see, touch, and feel to experience what is it like to be a human being. How many of us have the opportunity to experience God on a deeper level, on the spiritual level? So I would say that what we are doing, at least sharing on my personal end, is that we hope to actually restore some level of, it's not just purpose, but redeem a sense of self-respect. Because a lot of the youth, a lot of our adults, and even the older adults that I deal with, are actually feeling so lost as a human being, in spite of having achieved so much on the professional side. But deep down, they still feel a sense of shame, because in some respects, they feel they have not lived entirely truthfully. What they believe is true. They have not operated, they have not functioned, they have not navigated the world as truthfully as they would like. So in spite of their accomplishments, in spite of the amount of assets they have accrued, there is still some sense of shame, regret, guilt, which we see playing out in their adult life. So that's why a lot of people are struggling with physical and mental health issues, because there's a dissonance between who they think they are and what they are meant to do. All right. And so that's my 2 cents worth. Thanks, Pastor Jerry.
Okay, so that's all. We will have time for probably one more question. Is there any burning question from one person? Just unmute yourself, we'll answer it. And then thanks for joining us. If you would be interested in the 2 bonus sessions, send your replies via emails. We are collecting testimonials too. So any questions?
Before we take final questions, just to let you know, for those who are having, like Thelma, having some issues with the transmission today, sorry about that. But the link is there, and we will be updating all the seminars here up at this link. So check back within the next few hours, and everything should be there from today. Final questions, anyone? Go ahead. Comments, thoughts, observations? Go ahead, unmute yourself.
If there is none, trauma for each archetype is something we'll cover more in the bonus session. It's a bit personal, and it takes psychological safety to open up. So because these series are actually available on YouTube, we won't be covering it in greater detail. But long story short is the trauma for each archetype is quite different. Like for scientists, the trauma is a bit more of rejection from people not seeing what they see. From the emergency rescuer, one of their trauma is actually not being loved for kind of who they are in that sense, or maybe not being seen for who they are. Yeah, but we will go into deeper detail in the what you call that, the bonus sessions. Yeah, so anything you can ask Pastor Jared, like, you know, if you have any last minute things, and if not, then we can keep in touch via email. Thanks everyone for your participation, and yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, God bless.
Thanks everyone.
Shalom.
Thank you very much. God bless. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless.
God bless. God bless. Yes, please send in your testimonials too. Thank you very much.
I've sent.
Yes, thanks, Araceli. Okay.